Welcome to episode 179 of the Daniel Yours podcast with today's guest, Asad Sayal. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here by my friend Asad. Asad, we're finally meeting each other and speaking to each other, not at a random event that we didn't expect to see at each other in and around the city of Toronto. What are the chances?
Yeah, man. This is we've ran into each other twice, right? Lane Norton and James Smith and Chris Williamson.
That's right. Yeah. Small world. I mean, Toronto is a big city. I think Toronto is an underrated big city. People don't realize that it's the fourth, I think, biggest city in North America, or maybe US and Canada. But right. It's also very small in that way. So, it's big city, but small city. But man, it's good to see you. And thanks for making the time.
Thank you for having me on.
How do you go about introducing yourself and telling people what it is that you do?
Well, I usually start with an icebreaker and I try to get people to laugh. So my name is spelled A-S-A-D. It's pronounced differently in other languages. But I usually open with, pretend you're trying to insult someone. Like, hey, that's a sad little boy. That usually gets a giggle or two. And then in terms of what I do, I teach people how to pick heavy things up and put them down again multiple times. But more than that, I help people get stronger. I help people feel better. I help people break through limiting beliefs, whether it's I can't do X because something hurts, or like, oh, I'm too old for that, or like, oh, no, I don't want to get too bulky, or whatever it ends up being, right? So my preferred tools of the trade are strength training. I use my tools to get people stronger so that they end up feeling better about themselves. They can go back out into the world and do what it is they actually care about.
So the way that you're describing training is what I would deem a very mature way to think about it. And the most obvious thing that points to that is that you didn't say, oh, it's about helping people lose weight and get a six pack. And like, I'm sure that's part of it. And I'm sure that's it's obviously cool and part of what we do. But there's so much more in talking about strength training and performance and the way that they feel about themselves in the world. How did you sort of arrive at that conclusion? Like, I kind of imagine that's not what you always thought about from the outside. It's like, I just want to like get jacked and like, get attention, whatever. But like, what was your evolution through that?
My evolution through that, honestly, it came through a lot of trial and error, right? Because when I started out working with actual other human beings, because like, you and I, we had our reasons for doing what we did. We got into it and we thought it would lead to whatever results. And then eventually we had our own realizations along the way. I had my reasons for getting into working out, and you know what? It makes me feel better. It helps me accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. But then when I'm dealing with other human beings and I'm working with them, I realize that they don't necessarily care about the same things that I care about. Mm. And then not only that, it's just like, you think you're coming in for one thing, but in reality, there's some other emotional driver behind it. What I mean by that is, like on some level, let's be real. Everyone and their grandmother wants to look better naked, right? That's what's going to get most people through the doors of the gym. But that is rarely the thing that gets people to stay. The way I like to think is like, I usually use extreme examples just because it helps you understand principles. And then from there, we can reverse engineer everything else. Mm-hmm. So let's just imagine your worst possible day, right? It's 5 a.m. We live in Canada, so the weather is absolutely horrible out. I don't know. You had a stressful day at work than the day before. You probably had a fight with your partner. If you have kids, they kept you up. Like, everything's been thrown at the wall. On a day like that, what's going to get you out of bed and keep you coming back to the gym? It's probably not going to be the six pack, or it's probably not going to be the aesthetic based goal. So then you start asking questions about what is it that people actually care about. And you start asking them, why do you want to look better? Why do you want to lose weight? Why do you want to build muscle? Why do you want to do X, Y, or Z? And it's rarely ever just an aesthetic based thing. Usually there's some sort of an emotional driver behind it. Like, I want to be able to keep up with my kids as they age. I want to be able to ski because that's the thing that brings me joy, or that's how I connect with my friends. Or, you know what, if I get stronger or if I lose weight, I feel better about myself. If I feel better about myself, you know what, I perform better at my job. If I perform better at my job, I can be more present as a husband or a father or whatever it is, right? So there's always some sort of a emotional driver. And like, it's like the Russian dolls, right? You start with the big doll, but then you keep opening them up and there's a tiny little doll inside. So like, what I really care about is, what is that tiny little doll that got you to walk in the door in the first place and even want to make the change?
I think it's also important to say that it's really difficult, but also vital to get the person to understand that themselves. Because I think a lot of people don't really know that inner reason why. I think a lot of people will say like, yeah, I just want to like, I want to lose 10 pounds. And correct me if I'm wrong. I bet you get this all the time because I know I get it all the time, and lots of trainers get this all the time. You meet someone brand new, you tell them, you're a trainer, and they're like, oh yeah, I should really, they like rub their stomach and like, oh, I got to get back in the gym. It's like, okay, like, what are we talking about here? But I think that it's hard to kind of ask those really deep personal questions to understand like, oh, I actually do care about this because I want to play with my kids, because I saw my mother never wear a bathing suit because she was ashamed of her body, because of whatever other things might be. But asking those like that why, the I guess the Socratic method of questioning to continue kind of going down that rabbit hole is very important. And I agree with you that it is the thing that will keep people sticking around longer, because it's a very strong motivation. And then once you figured that part out, like the nuts and bolts of training are like not that difficult. It's relatively simple to figure it out for most people.
Yeah, it's as easy or as hard as you want to make it. And then to take that one step further, you can sort of like leverage psychology when it comes to things like this, right? So then the thing you start to realize is we're not really wired for long-term thinking. Most of us, whether we like it or not, we really thrive off some form of instant gratification, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if my goal is I want to lose 10 pounds or 20 pounds or whatever it is, that's going to happen at some point in the future. But like you and I, we can't really control when it'll happen. All we can really do is just, are we doing the things we need to do to create the environment where that can even occur, whenever it may occur? So you need something in the meantime to tide you over. And that's where like shifting perspective from like aesthetic-based goals to something a little bit more immediate, like performance-based goals, becomes a little bit more relevant, right? Because I can't, if every day you wake up and you're just like, have I lost 10 pounds yet? No. Have I lost 10 pounds yet? No. You're going to feel disappointed and defeated every single day. But if you come back in the gym and you're just like, oh, you know what? Yesterday I could only do 7 push-ups, whereas today, you know what? I'm a little bit closer to my 8th. Or like, I could only do like 1 chin-up, whereas now I can do 2, right? It's just like things like that light a fire under people's ass, and then they start focusing on doing the things that make them feel better. And if you do the things that make you feel better, as a side effect of that, you're just going to do the things that make you look better. Versus if you're only chasing the things that make you look better, you're going to sidestep a whole lot of like skill building and identity formation that just really ties it all together.
The aesthetic thing is also a very finite goal. Say you want to lose 10 pounds. Well, okay, great. That took you however long it took you, a couple months, and you lost 10 pounds. And then what? Like, what do you do after that? You just stop working out for forever and stop, dieting and eating healthy for forever. What's going to happen? It's just going to go right back to what you were like. Exactly. You wash your hands of it and you're right back where you were. And then you'll just, repeat that cycle, I guess, for the rest of your life. But chasing some sort of performance goal will, like you said, get you towards that aesthetic goal, but it also gives you something to continue chasing. After you do 7 push-ups, you do 8, then you do 9, then you do 10, then, you just keep going and you do different things. You start bench pressing, whatever the case may be. Now, there's obviously some end to that, but there are so many different performance metrics that you can chase. Like, you're not just going to be like, hey, I want my, you're not just going to try and do, 1,000 push-ups in a row or squat 1,000 pounds. Like, that's probably not what you're going to try and do. But there's so many different ways that you could go to attack it. I mean, I guess you could try and squat 1,000 pounds, but this is a different. Most people, that's not really a real goal for most people.
No, but I don't know, the way my mind works, I hear that and I'm just like, challenge accepted, watch me. But yes, for most people that we work with, it's that's not the thing they end up caring about. It's funny. Like, for example, someone comes to me and they're just like, oh, why should I squat? Why should I do lunges? Why should I do that? And again, it goes back to the psychology and emotional side of things, right? It's just like, this doesn't have to be the thing you care about, but it will be the thing that allows you to get more of what you do care about. So I used like a skiing example earlier because one of my clients was very, when we first started, very skeptical of strength training. But the thing that he absolutely loves doing is he loves skiing. But the problem is lately when he's been skiing, his knee hurts, right? So then I'm just like, don't even think about the squats. Don't even think about the lunges. Think about, let's do the thing that makes your knee feels better so that when you go skiing, you don't have to worry about a thing and you can just enjoy yourself, right? Couple weeks, couple months of that, and all of a sudden the pain in his knee goes away, and now he's going and doing the thing that he actually enjoys with his friends, now you can't stop him from coming back to the gym. Not
Mm-hmm.
because he has any aspirations to, squat that 1,000 pounds like we were talking about, but he's connected this with something that he genuinely cares for, right? So the squat is no longer, you're not just coming here to squat. You're not just coming here to lunge or do whatever you need to do. You're coming here to look after yourself so that when you go do the thing that you actually care about, you can enjoy yourself.
So this is an interesting topic of conversation, and I think it's because, as with everything online, it gets taken a little bit too far and without enough nuance. And so there's been a big push towards like enjoying the process and trusting the process and loving the whole journey and all that nice stuff. I think it's good. Mostly, it's all well intentioned, but the reality is, like, some people are just not gonna like going to the gym. And you, like, telling them to enjoy that is not a way to like actually foster that. So, with a little bit more nuance, I think that we can appreciate that, like, hey, you might not like this whole strength training thing, and that's okay. But this is how you get what you want, which is being able to ski, being able to do whatever other things you do. And if you can just suck it up and do the strength training to get that end result, then maybe somewhere along the way, you'll begin to at least appreciate or hate the process of strength training less. And I think a good analogy for this, and let me know if you've got a better one, is like, how many people hate their jobs, but you still go to your job every day, every week, because you want money, and that's what you get out of going to work. You don't go to your job because you love your job. You go to your job because you want money. And if you weren't getting the money, you wouldn't go to your job. So you don't love the process of everything. You just do things to get an intended result. And maybe along the way, you'll hate it less. And I think that that's like, it's okay to accept that, hey, I don't like strength training, but it has a lot of benefits for me. And so I'm just going to suck it up and do it anyways because I want X thing.
I see your analogy, and I raise you another one. As a kid, I had a lot of bad habits. One of them was sometimes I would try to go to sleep without brushing my teeth. And my mom always used to, tell me, go brush your teeth. And then, I used to say that I don't like brushing my teeth. I don't enjoy it. Why should I do it? And she's like, it doesn't really matter whether you enjoy it or not. You just need to go do it. Right. So it's sort of like one of those things where, like, I don't have to like the act of brushing my teeth, but I know if I don't brush my teeth, hey, you know what? Other people are probably not going to want to sit close to me. I'm probably not going to be too successful dating, or you know what? I'm just probably not going to be too pleasant to look at, right? There's just a whole, and forget all that. The health downsides that come later down the line, right? So it's strength training, coming to the gym, any form of physical activity, insert X here. It does not have to be the thing that you are passionate about, but think of it as another form of, you are just doing this thing for yourself on a daily basis because you're just trying to improve your overall experience of life. That's all it really is. It doesn't have to be your life. It's just one of those things that allows you to get more out of life, or at least not hold you back.
Completely agreed. I don't even think it's any exaggeration to say that, like, physical activity is required. It's a requirement for life because we live in a world that isn't conducive to it naturally. Like, if you're not thinking about it, you can go days and days with getting less than 2,000 steps. Like, you can be really inactive if you're not paying attention to it. And that's obviously not good for us. Forget all the other stuff, just like your baseline health metrics. Like, that is not healthy for you, and your life is not going to be very good for very long if you continue that. But it doesn't have to be strength training. I think maybe we're probably both biased because we like strength training and it's our profession. But if someone came to you and said, "Hey, listen, I just really, like, I can't be bothered to lift another weight again in my life. I really love, I don't know, Zumba, or I love..."
How did I know?
Because it's just like the silliest, whatever. It's not silly. It's just like not, it's like exercise, but like it's not, it's in a gym setting ish, but like not actually strength training. I don't know. But like whatever, some type of like structured, I love that. Like, hey, please go do that. Like, do not sit on the couch and just like do nothing. I think you get more benefits and more out of strength training and blah, blah, blah. But like, you got to keep moving, and it's just a requirement for life. And it has to become one of these things like brushing your teeth, where it's like, well, just do it because I said so. Like, I don't really care if you like this or not. Like, you need to be moving your body and be physically active.
Right. Yeah. It's sorry, go on.
No. I was just gonna continue saying, like, I'm not sure that we should force anyone to do anything. Like, there were people who say that, not that I'm not sure. I'm sure that we shouldn't. There are people who say, like, oh, gym memberships should be paid for by the
Mm-hmm.
government or should be mandated to exercise and to go to the gym and to do this. And I think that that actually removes a lot from it. I think that we should empower people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But you should be free to do whatever you want, but you get so much benefit from choosing to get up and go do it rather than being forced to go do it, which is not the same as brushing your teeth. Like you just brush your
Yeah.
teeth and and then move on with your day. But you choosing to go exercise when you could just stay on the couch, scrolling TikTok, like that's a different thing than someone forcing you to go exercise, I think.
Yeah. Plus, like, there's, I don't think so for example, if we were to get the government to pay for gym memberships, right? I don't think that's the thing that's holding most people back from going, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to join like a boutique club, right? You could go to your local commercial big box gym, and the memberships there are fairly accessible, some more than others. So I don't know if that's necessarily the barrier to entry. And then there's also the element of just needing some skin in the game, right? Because like, how many times have you mentioned the party example where like you mentioned you're a trainer and then someone mentions, oh, you know what, I really need to get back in the gym, or like, oh, I eat X, Y, or Z foods, or back in high school I used to be able to. That's a whole other tangent. But like, there's you need something. Like, how many times has a family member asked you for like a meal plan, which is a whole other topic, by the way. But like, there's no point in you giving it to them, because one, let's ignore all you're not teaching them any skills. You're not teaching a man how to fish. You're just giving them the fish, and then they're going to be screwed after that. But then they have nothing to lose. They haven't invested anything in the process. They haven't actually made a choice to better themselves. They haven't decided that they need to upskill in any area of their life. So I think if you remove that, like, for lack of a better word, opportunity to put some skin in the game, that's not going to get people more physically active. If anything, that's just going to keep them a little bit more complacent.
100% agreed. And yes, I have those experiences with family members and some of my friends, and a lot of my friends are like, oh, make me a program for this. I'm like, but just use one of the other 7 programs that I've written for you that you didn't do from last time. Like, just, it's nothing changed. It's the same. The
Right.
squats are still squats. Just do them. Yes, you do need some skin in the game. And I think it's because knowing what to do is not so much the issue as like doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're going to get into some like nuts and bolts of training and some more particulars, but like, if you didn't know anything, you could just go to the gym, like do 5 machines, any 5 machines, and then go home. And that would be like not horrible, assuming you didn't hurt yourself. Right. You could kind of like figure it out. If you just did push-ups and like body weight squats, like forever, you'd be okay. All right. You wouldn't be going to the Olympia, but like you'd be fine. Or if you just went outside and walked or ran, or, ran up some stairs outside, like these things are all free as well. Like you could do all those things and you'd be fine. So it's like, we're not that coupled with, we have endless access to information. Like you can, listening to this podcast is free. There's millions of posts on social media and articles and YouTube videos. Like you can find out all the stuff. It's actually getting yourself to do the stuff. And back to an earlier point you made about being a little bit more motivated by things that are like instant gratification. We understand money and financial transactions very, very well. Yeah. So it's like, if I pay you $10, well, I got to get something for my $10. So if I paid you $10 for whatever, I'm not just going to not do it now. Then I just burn $10. I'm not going to do that. So if I paid you $10, $100, $1,000, you better damn believe I'm going to do the things that you're telling me to do. And that's where that motivation aspect comes in, because it's not like you're going to do something so drastically different. You're just actually going to do it. And that's where the results come in.
Yeah. So motivation is a bit of a funny thing, right? We keep using that word, and I have a bit of a problem with it. Not because I disagree with it in any way, but it's just that I remember like reading this once. Someone gave an analogy of motivation being part of the 5-step process, right? And people assume that it needs to be step number 1, and that's the thing that starts you off, right? You get motivated, and therefore you go do the things, and therefore you experience the benefits. Whereas I would actually argue it's the exact opposite, right? In the sense that if it was a 5-step process, motivation is actually the result of your process, not the thing that starts it off, right? So step number 1 would be regardless of how you feel, take action, right? I didn't want to brush my teeth, but I had to brush my teeth, right? You take action, you do it consistently enough, right? It becomes a habit, right? You stick with the habits, long enough, eventually it becomes a routine. You stick with the routine, you get results. Once you see results, and then all of a sudden, now you're motivated, right? So then that's the thing that sort of ends up lighting a fire under your ass, where you're just like, okay, I didn't feel like going to the gym, but yet last week, you know what? I could only sit up and down off a bench a couple times, and I got winded. This week, you know what? I was able to hold the 10-pound dumbbell while I was squatting. And next week, you know what? Maybe I'll try the 15. That right there, that's motivation. Run, not like, oh, I know I should really go to the gym today. Because like realistically, and I've said this before many times, you're never going to be more motivated than you are either in the shower when you're telling yourself stories about your life, or when you're in bed the night before thinking about all the things you're going to get done the next day until you wake up and you're exhausted, right? So motivation is sort of like, it's the result of taking action consistently and doing the thing and getting what you want, and then seeing, oh my God, this is actually possible. Not this like wishful thinking that sometimes really does strike, and strike while the iron's hot if that's the case, but most times it's fairly unreliable. And if you don't mind us backtracking for a second, I actually want to dig deeper into something you said a second ago. So you said, there's a whole bunch of programs out there that like people could just like, find any program anywhere. Realistically, if you're shopping, you could like, pick one up in a magazine. Like it's not the best program in the world, but it is a program. And you said access to information isn't a problem. I guess a question I have for you, and like, let's sort of go back and forth on this, is would you actually say access to information isn't the problem anymore? Because yeah, you could make the point that access to information isn't a barrier anymore because it's so easy to find information. But then a lot of conversations I'm having with my clients, and I'm sure you have similar conversations with yours, is there's so much information out there that they don't really know what is correct. What is it they should actually be acting on? And then for a lot of people that I end up working with, it's actually the paralysis by analysis, right? It's like, this person told me, you know what, I should be going carnivore. This person told me I should be putting butter in my coffee. This person told me I should be fasting all day. How come you're telling me I can eat all the foods I want? I just have to be like mindful of my daily consumption and like relative to my goals, right? So it's one of those things where I would say, yes, previously access to information may have been a barrier if you didn't know where to look. But I would actually argue nowadays access to information is the problem, because there's so much stuff out there and so many people posing as experts. It's hard for the average person to discern what is it I should be paying attention to versus what's not really going to be serving me, or what's just not relevant to me at my current state right now.
I totally agree with you, and thank you for correcting my speech, because me saying that access to information isn't a problem is incorrect for the exact reasons that you said. We have way too much information, and it's way too difficult to sift through that for the average person. It may seem simple for you and I to sit here and say, yeah, okay, well we can easily see that carnivore is silly, XYZ thing is silly, like all these things are silly. But take something that you and I don't know anything about, like some other, completely different industry, not training or health or science related at all, like some accounting, tax law. Forgive me, I don't know if you know anything in depth about tax or whatever, but like if you saw something, like I have no idea. I don't know. Maybe you can write off all the stuff that you own. I don't know. This article said so I guess you can. Right. I don't know. Right. So yes, access to information is a problem, but we do have a ton of it out there. Now, I don't know what the solution is to sifting through all of this information. Do you have any thing that you think is like, how would you go about sifting through this stuff besides just, using critical thinking?
Well, I mean, critical thinking is like one of those things, right? Where it's like, that's like telling someone to eat intuitively. So me and you eating intuitively is different than telling, a day one client to eat intuitively, because our intuition is closer to subconscious calculation, right? Because it's based on years of experience and like an underlying foundation of knowledge.
Right. So people have been eating intuitively, and it got them where they were. So continuing to do that is not, anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So critical thinking, to me, if for intuitive eating, the intuition comes from experience and knowledge, I would say the same thing has to come from critical thinking, right? There has to be some sort of a foundation of knowledge. So the thing for me is whenever a client comes to me with information that they found online or that they're curious about, or that, hey, we're doing X, but someone else said Y. Why are we doing this, right? I try not to ridicule people and I try not to shame people because clearly they're showing and they want to learn, they want to improve themselves, right? So you don't want to stifle that, but you do want to sort of foster it and encourage it to go in a more helpful direction. So for me, the foundation here becomes education in the sense that if you are curious about a certain concept, whether it be a training method, whether it be a nutritional strategy, whether it be some sort of lifestyle habits, whatever it ends up being, we talk about what it is that appeals to you there and how this would be relevant, right? Using the example of like exercises, there's often times where like a client comes to me and they're just like, hey, you know, we're doing squat versus X person over there is, you know, doing this cool thing with a landmine where they're hopping on one leg and it looks really athletic and like very like sport specific. And then I'm just like, okay, cool. Like that, you know, you're right. But at the same time, that looks really good on camera. That doesn't necessarily means it has the benefits that you and I are working towards. You and I are doing this exercise because we're trying to achieve X, Y, or Z, right? That over there, I could make the argument that it is going to accomplish certain things at certain joints, or let's be real and just the most common sense thing here is you saw this because it popped up on your feed. It popped up on your feed because someone thought it might look good on camera. They were right. People clicked on it. People shared it. And now you're watching it and you're confused about, oh my God, is this what I should be doing? Right. So that's where sort of education really comes in, because if I've done my job, either at creating a space where my clients can come to me and ask me questions without fear of judgment, or if I've just given them the tools to recognize, hey, this may not be relevant to me or my needs or my goals, then that's sort of where the critical thinking comes in, right?
Yeah. I mean, definitely having a coach or a trusted resource of someone or something is the move. But even finding that can be difficult because like there are plenty of coaches out there who are the ones putting out all the nonsense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you trust that person and know they have great abs and do, you know, cool one leg jumpy things with a landmine, like that, you know, and that like fires you up and gets you excited, like you may trust that person as a voice of authority.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be then a slippery slope because it's easier. There's like a quote. It's something to the effect of, it's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they've been fooled. Right, so you go down this rabbit hole of, you know, keto, blah, 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 you know, things. And then at some point, this person sees someone else who's a little bit more level-headed, a little bit more evidence-based, a little bit more, you know, realistic. And they're like, hold on a second. So you're telling me everything that I've like learned for the past 3 years is wrong? Like that's impossible. Like, because then it's also an ego thing. It's like, well, then, and am I an idiot? Am I the one who's been fooled? Like it couldn't have been me. It's other people who are like falling for these like nonsense things, right? And so then we run into that whole issue. So like, I don't think there's a real solution. I think you gotta, you know, it's a roll of the dice at some point to like find good people and then use some like thought exercises, I think, to siphon through some nonsense. And the one that I use, and I'll get your thoughts on this, is like when you see a claim that seems like too good to be true. One, is it an absolute statement? Because if that's the case and they only speak in absolutes, like that's probably a red flag. Number two is right. The other thing is that's a Star Wars reference, right?
100%. Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Okay, there you go. Can't say that I get the reference, but I knew that it was Star Wars, so I'll pat myself on the back for that. The other thing is this: is the thing that this person is claiming, this method, are they smarter than everyone else in the world that they figured this out, or are they wrong? And which of those two things is more likely? And I think that, you know, will sift through a lot of nonsense.
Let's build on top of that a little bit, because so for example, the first time you and I met, we met at we came to watch Lane Norton speak here in Toronto, or I guess technically Burlington. But something that he often says is look at the language someone was using, right? Are they, like you said, speaking in absolutes? But then not only that, are the words they're using, you know, like best, worst, only, right? Like things like that, like you said, in absolutes, or do they speak with a little bit more nuance? It depends. Why? You know, like what are your goals? For who? Right? So it's ironic in the sense that the people who you are going to trust the most are going to be the people who speak with the most conviction, because why would you not want to follow someone who seems so sure of themselves and so sure of their method? Versus the irony on all this is the people you really want to be listening to are the people who offer you that nuance. It's going to be a little bit annoying on your end because you want to be filled with confidence. And here's this person saying things like, it depends, or why, or in what situation, right? Or like, it could work, but you might want to think about this, right? So like, it's go for the person who offers you the nuance as opposed to the person who just offers you the method, right? Because if we're talking about methods, right, you want to go for the person who teaches you the underlying principles, and then you have the skills to go and choose the method that suits your preferences, versus just the person saying, here is the best way, here is the one method, go do this. And then there's going to be a certain population of people where it works for them because that just lines up with their preferences. But there's going to be an even larger population full of people where that method is just not the best for them. But had they understood the underlying principles, they wouldn't feel tied or trapped to that one method. They could go off and do other things as long as they understand why they're doing what they're doing, right? Which is where that nuance comes in.
This makes this all kind of come full circle, because this is how you stay in the game, so to speak, for forever, right? You get your first goal of performance or aesthetics or whatever, but then you get injured, your lifestyle changes, maybe, any number of things like in your life change, and your life will change and evolve over years. And so now what worked for you 3 years ago doesn't work for you anymore. That exact specific method and strategy. The principles are still the same because human physiology is human physiology, but now because you understand the underlying principles of that, you can adjust the plan to accommodate your new life situation. And then you can continue to iterate that as many times and as often as you need to accommodate your changing lifestyle. And that's where the magic is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, couldn't agree more.
Let's switch gears a little bit to some more in-depth training stuff. And I know this is not a great segue, but I want to make sure that we get to this because I specifically want to talk to you about this stuff. So something that you employ, or that I see that you employ, I'm sure obviously you don't do this with every single client every single time because of all the things that we just talked about, but using tempo in your training and focusing on the eccentric portion of the training. So first of all, can you explain what that means? And then we'll talk about like times to use it and how you use it, because I assume whoever's listening to this doesn't know what that means, because I feel like walk around most gyms, people have no idea.
Yeah. So first, let's just make sure everyone's on the same page, right? Everyone imagine a bicep curl, right? It's on the way down, on the way up, right? So let's just make sure we're speaking the same language. So when you are lowering your hand and straightening out your arm, that is the eccentric component of the movement, right? That's where the muscle is lengthening. Right? Then concentric is when you are shortening the muscle, when you're curling the weight back up, right? And then there's isometric, which is, let's just say I hold the weight halfway down and I'm just resisting gravity, right? So now I'm creating tension by maintaining the same joint angle, right? So let's just, because we're going to be using those words over and over again, I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. Mm-hmm. So this is actually a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. So if I go down a rabbit hole, I apologize. Feel free to stop me. I often see a lot of people saying, they refer to things as tempo training, or like if I give someone a deadlift and they look at the tempo that I wrote down for them, it's like, whoa, we're doing tempo deadlifts. Or it's like, this is not tempo training. This is not tempo deadlifts. It's simply just training. Tempo is just one of the variables we use to modify your training or cater it to whatever result we're trying to achieve, right? Just like the number of sets you're doing, the number of reps you're doing, the amount of rest you're getting. Why do I use it and who do I use it with? I simply alter the tempo to change the outcome of the exercise, or change maybe what it is I'm trying to emphasize with the exercise. So to me, exercises are tools that we are using to achieve a result or accomplish a job. So the best analogy I can give you for this is think of a squat as like a screwdriver, for example, right? People think a squat is just a squat. It's just the one screwdriver with the one head, and that's just all it is. You only use it for that one specific job. Versus the way I like to think about it is one of those adjustable screwdrivers where you can like remove and attach different heads or like different sizes for whatever job you might need, right? So yes, a squat is a squat, But at the same time, I can use the squat for two different people. Right now, I'm using it for two different people in the sense that just by altering the tempo, for one person, I'm using the squat to rehab their knee and make sure that they don't feel pain when they go past a certain point. For another person, I'm altering the tempo and having them pause at certain points in the movement to really emphasize their thoracic extension, their ability to keep their spine straight and elongated and sort of like pushing their head towards the ceiling, because that's the thing that sort of limits them, is maintaining their ribcage position. So it's the same exercise, but by me altering the tempo, either I am creating more tension at certain points in the movement, or I'm bringing more awareness to a certain part of the movement, right? Or I'm just changing the outcome. Because, like, for example, I could have you stretching, I could have you stretching your ankles for X amount of time, but let's be real. Most people we work with, they're not going to have time to come into the gym, do their 1 hour long workout, and then on top of that, still spend time mobilizing either before or after, right? If they have time, amazing, right? But most people don't. So I'd rather pick movements where I can get the most bang for my buck. So if I have you doing a squat or like a split squat, but I add like a 2-second pause at the bottom, and I make sure you're being as strict as possible with your technique, where you're keeping an upright torso and you're pausing at the bottom of the movement, right? Yes, now that is a strength exercise, but at the same time, by creating more tension in that bottom position, it becomes a loaded stretch. Now we're mobilizing your ankles at the same time as we're strengthening your quad and your glute and stretching your back hip, right? So tempo training is not a separate thing to just normal training, right? Strength training involves tempo. It's just another variable. So the reason I alter it where I use it, it's literally just, what am I trying to get done? Who am I trying to help? And what is it we need to focus on, right? And it's to sort of make each exercise catered to the needs of the individual, as opposed to, just giving you an exercise and, go hope for the best.
Totally agreed. And that's a phenomenal explanation of that. I think that thinking about tempo as just another variable that you do, it's not a different type of training. Now, this is probably like a little bit of argument of semantics, and like, people like you and I know I do. I get upset about these things. Like, why are you calling it that? Like, it's not a thing. But anyways, like, you're using tempo, whether you're paying attention to it or not, you're using some sort of speed. You're either doing it fast or slow or variable, or like, whether you're paying attention to it or not, it's happening. So, might as well pay attention to it and like use it for whatever a purpose that makes sense for whatever goal that you're trying to achieve with said exercise.
By giving you a written tempo, all we're doing is just standardizing each rep. Each rep is now working towards the same end, as opposed to some being fast, some being slow, some being paused, right? By telling you to go X amount of seconds, pause here, don't pause here, whatever it is, each rep theoretically is working towards the same end, which means now we are going to achieve whatever we're trying to achieve faster, right? It's just a method of standardizing things.
Now, what point in someone's training, say they're a total beginner, like they just came to gym for today for the first time, what point would you start slowing down their tempo? As opposed to like, hey, just do the squat at, whatever speed is comfortable. Say their form is good, like they've learned to do everything. When do you start introducing tempo?
So this is going back to our previous conversation. It depends, right? It depends on the person. So there's going to be some people where my focus in the short term is literally just going to be, oh, okay, you know what? The most beneficial thing for you right now is, let's just learn the mechanics of the movement. Let's just get confident with the positioning, the foot pressure, the posture, whatever it ends up being. And from there, as you get better at this, I'll give you one more thing to think about. That's, that can be one person. Versus person B, I find that, maybe they learn completely differently. Maybe they will actually learn the mechanics and the ins and outs of the movement if I actually get them to slow down right off the bat, which is something that I used to do much earlier in my career. We can talk about the reason why I stopped doing that for everybody if you want. But what I used to do in the beginning is right from the get-go. Day one, we're talking about tempo. We're introducing it. You are owning the different positions and different parts of the movement. You're understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And some people just learn better that way, where right off the bat, you sort of really get them to take ownership of the movement and not just mindlessly go from point A to point B. Because we don't really care. Like, again, we're just going to keep using the squat as an example because everyone understands it. everyone knows, okay, you start up here, you finish down here, right? It's not about covering that distance. It's more about how are you covering that distance? What is the internal environment you're creating with the things you're thinking about? What is it you're focusing on? So I care more about how you do the movement than necessarily can you do the movements, right? Because again, back to standardizing it. A squat is a squat, but not all squats are working towards the same end. So it really depends on the person. Some people I find learn better just by giving them one thing to work on at a time, in which case, let's just get you comfortable and confident with the movement, and then we'll introduce tempos, eccentrics, pauses, isometrics, whatever it ends up being. Whereas other people, I find they actually learn better if we start forcing them to be really mindful right out the gate.
To even go back to what we were saying about it just being a training variable, I would say the same is probably true for someone who's a total beginner. Is I don't really care about how many like reps they did either. Mm-hmm. Like, we said, okay, 3 sets of 10 reps. Like, great. If you were like gassed after 6, or like it's not looking good, or like you're feeling good, we'll just do more. Like the reps are also a thing that we use to describe what we're doing with words and to standardize the work that we're doing. But when someone is brand new learning something, like it doesn't actually matter. The one thing that I always say is like your body can't count. Your body doesn't know that you've done 10 reps or 13 reps or 27 reps. It just knows that like some force has been applied and that's what it understands. So then applying the tempo after that as a teaching tool or as an additional training mechanism is definitely a thing that it's definitely a thing that matters a lot and that not nearly enough people pay attention to. And for the reason where you could do 10 squats with 100 pounds, 10 squats with 100 pounds with not paying attention to what you're doing, or 10 squats with 100 pounds with, a 4-second eccentric. Those are not the same things. And it's like one is not better or worse. They're just different. And that's, I think, the key to understand here.
Yeah, that's very similar to something I used to sort of, quote unquote, trick my clients with. Call it a trick, call it a Jedi mind trick, call it whatever you want. Another Star Wars reference for you. In the sense that, I find that a lot, and this is not 100% true, but this is just something I use to sell people on the concept of it before we can have more nuanced conversations. I find that, more often than not, men are a little bit more tied to the weight that they're lifting, because obviously they want to lift more, they want to feel stronger. So I remember this one client in particular, he wanted to, it was like our first session, and then he had some history of exercising. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like if you were to do a single arm dumbbell overhead press, how much weight do you think you'd be lifting? And he's just like, oh yeah, 40 pounds. So I'm like, okay, cool. Show me a couple of reps. Let's see what it looks like. He showed me what it looked like. I looked at his technique, looked at his positioning, looked at his overhead mobility, rib cage position, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm just like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to put the 40 pounds down. You're going to go grab the 20, except now we're going to standardize it, and you're going to go 4 seconds down each rep, and you're just going to accelerate back up to the top position as fast as you can. And he was just like, why? Right? So the way that I sold him on that is very similar to what you just said. In the sense that I'm just like, oh, your muscle doesn't know the difference between 20 pounds and 100 pounds or 40 pounds or whatever it is. Your muscles only understand tension. Your nervous system understands tension. The tempo is just the vehicle that we are using to deliver that tension, right? And then the longer we keep tension on that muscle or on a joint in certain positions, right? That's where the benefit's going to come in from. So it's not whether you're lifting 20 or whether you're lifting 40. It's as I'm lifting, you know what, am I actually putting a stretch on the muscle that I'm trying to grow in the bottom position? Or when I'm in that top position, am I actually, managing my ribcage position so that the overhead shoulder flexion is coming from my actual shoulder? Or is it just from me flaring my ribcage and faking that mobility? Right. So it's sometimes you just have to like package things in a certain way.
Yeah. Another like kind of sales is not the right word, but for lack of a better word, kind of like selling people on training and again, more common with men for sure, but like people come in with an ego and it's like, oh, like I'm strong. I'm like, I can do all this stuff. And it's like, oh yeah. Okay. Well, let's do it with 20 pounds and 5 seconds on the way down. And then let's see how strong you are, like big tough guy. You got to kind of break someone's ego a little bit just to get that buy-in. Right. And this only kind of works. And there's a lot of human personal relationship stuff and communication and whatever that comes into that. It's not just that blunt. But there's some breaking down of ego that needs to happen sometimes with some people, so that you can then like, okay, now we're going to do these things because of these reasons. Another thing, and just to say quickly there, is that along exactly the lines of what you're saying, is it also allows you to use lighter weights and get like very similar results sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's certainly a time to use heavier weights and to move fast and to all that stuff, which is the same as manipulating the tempo to move slowly. You manipulate the tempo to move quickly as well. So it's also a
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Tempo is not
But
just moving slow, right? It's just standardizing. So you could also standardize it to be a very quick, explosive, reactive movement.
which goes back to your earlier point about tempo training doesn't make any sense, because what if I wanted to train explosively? Like, that's also tempo. But anyways, for some older people or people who are coming back from injury, it allows you to get the same benefits or similar benefits while using less external force on your body. And so that you can control that 20-pound dumbbell a lot better than you can control that 40-pound dumbbell, so that you're not maybe going to hit failure in the same way. And if you do, it's way more easy to control because you can kind of just roll out of it or throw it or, whatever you need to do. So it can also be a lot safer way to train for many people as well.
And that goes back to the standardizing thing, right? In the sense that if you're just moving the weight from point A to point B, which any jackass can do, right? Then yes, you might be safe, you might not, or you might wonder, oh my God, what happened? Why did I insert X injury here, right? Versus if each rep is theoretically or roughly, because we do live in the real world, close enough to being the exact same, you're always aiming for the same, right? You're always going to be training in a way where it's going to feel much safer. If each rep you're owning the position and you're being mindful of how it is you're moving from point A to point B, you're more likely than not, I would bet, going to be safer and much less injury prone. Is it because it's bulletproofing you or any of those marketing bullshit terms in any way? Maybe, maybe not, right? But it's definitely instilling good habits, and it's, again, causing you to really take ownership of the positions you're putting your body in, which goes back to what you said about the guys coming into the gym with the ego, right? And they're saying they're strong. So something I like to tell my clients a lot, there is a big difference between gym strong and actual strong, right? I know guys who, are aspiring to be on a powerlifting platform, and, they deadlift like monstrous amounts of weight, like 500-600 pounds for reps. Meanwhile, they can't carry a sheet of wood when it comes time to like help their friends, like, build an Olympic lifting platform. I know guys who, again, squat monstrous amounts of weight, but if I change their foot stance a little bit, they crumple like a piece of paper, or they throw their back out while playing basketball with their friends. Like, what good is the stuff you're doing in the gym if you are fragile to the point where just any semblance of real life causes you some sort of an event, right? The goal of training is to make you a more resilient, a more adaptable human being, so that you can go out into the real world and, be able to handle the pressures of life. Right? It's not to leave you more vulnerable to stress. It's to dose you with safe amounts of stress so that it's harder to poison you in the future. Right? Dosage makes the poison.
Resiliency is the key word there, that I think that is what maybe would make this make more sense for people who are new to utilizing slower tempos in their training, because of the exact reason you just said. It's gonna, now I don't know, I'm not gonna go into all the muscle physiology exactly here, but basically you're training the tissues in the joints a little bit better. Your ligaments, your tendons, the loaded stretching, the mobility gains like you were talking about earlier. That is all going to make it way more likely so that when you're walking down the street, you slip on some ice, you step out at a weird angle. Well, your knee and your ankle and your hip has kind of been here before and has a little bit more strength and mobility and robustness. And so therefore, nothing's going to tear. You're going to be okay. Versus the person who's only ever squatted quickly and in a very straight line and, not within much control, and they can move a lot of weight, but they don't have a lot of control over that weight. They might be more likely to get injured in that because it's so outside of what they've ever done before. Their body's just not prepared for it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's literally about just preparing you for what's to come, right? And just to give you a little bit of an aid there, right? In the sense that one of the benefits, if you want to sell people on this, on training a little bit slower, which again, I want to reiterate, tempo does not necessarily mean slower. It could also be faster. It's simply just a metric of standardizing, but I digress. Um, so,
You could even do both at the same time, really slow eccentric, really fast concentric. Like that's also a thing. But
that's an amazing, honestly, that's one of my favorite methods, right? You control it on the way down, decelerate, but then on the way up, try to explode, right? In that explosion, you're going to be recruiting more high threshold motor units, right? It's just going to be better. But anyways, I digress. So one of the ways you can sell people on it is one of the benefits of training slower, at least for a period of time, or at least for phases here or there, is your muscles will adapt a lot quicker than your tendons and your ligaments, versus if you slow down and, expose your tendons and ligaments and joints to that tension in different positions, right? Gives them a little bit more chance to catch up, to become a little bit more resilient and adaptable in those positions, right? And again, there's the mobility benefit that I mentioned earlier, right? For example, it's not just about having strength, but it's about, do you have access to the positions that allow you to express that strength? So, for example, I trained this one rugby player, and one of the things that's very important in rugby is that scrum position, where they're all like huddled up together and they're like, pushing against each other. This guy is freakishly strong. I wish I could take credit for its strength, but I can't. He's just a strong boy. But he came to me because he was dealing with certain issues, certain aches and pains. And not only that, it's just hard for him to access certain positions. Next thing you know, I'm still having him squat, but instead of a low bar squat, now we're doing a high bar squat. Instead of a high bar squat, now we're throwing in a little bit of wedges underneath his heels. So he's used to going a little bit lower and just accessing that bottom position. We're, mixing that in with some sort of single leg work that, again, acts as loaded stretching. There's a little bit of a mobility focus to this. Just because, actually not a little bit, why am I lying? Strength training is mobility training. I'll get back to that later if you want to. Like, there are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other.
1,000% agreed.
Yeah. But now we're literally using these strength training tools so that he can express his strength coming out of that bottom position, so that the next time he plays rugby, he's stronger out of that scrum position, right? So it's having strength is cool. Having mobility is cool. But ultimately what you want to do is you want to set yourself up so that you can express strength or stability or resiliency or whatever it is in the different positions you might either need to be in or could find yourself in, God forbid, if you slip and need to catch yourself or whatever it ends up being, right? So again, resiliency and adaptability, that should be the goal of a proper and intelligently designed training program.
Man, 1,000,000% agreed. And again, with the point that strength training is mobility training. Like, it's all the same and it's all meshed in together. You can't just sit there on the floor and bend over and touch your toes like you learned how to do in elementary school. And that's not going to like make you mobile and resilient and all that stuff. It's sure, it's good and helps and feels nice and whatever. But like that ain't it. Like, you've got to build some strength. You've got to build some resiliency and be able to move and own those movements. And once you've done all of that, that's how you can do the fancy one leg landmine jumpy around stuff, because you own the shit out of all the stuff in your body. And then you can go do weird stuff that looks cool on Instagram. Now, that's not
if
training.
You even want to.
If you even wanted to, right? But it's like, that's not even training. It's like, that's just an expression of strength, of mobility, of your performance, where it's like, hey, we see something on Instagram. It's like, hey, I'm sure you've done this because I know I've done it. You see some weird shit on Instagram and, you're pretty strong, you're pretty mobile, you're all that stuff. And you're like, I wonder if I could do that. And you just go and like try it, but you'd never give it to a client. You'd never do it for 3 sets of 10 reps in a training program. You're just like fucking around in the gym. You're like, I wonder if I could like do this thing. Wonder if I could walk on one leg and do this. And like, that's fine. That's cool. But there's so much more that comes before that, before you get to kind of fuck around and find out with what you can do with your body.
I'm so glad you framed it that way. That is the best possible way you could have worded it. Those, let's call them party tricks, are expressions of strength. They're expressions of mobility, but they're not the thing that you use to get that strength, to get that mobility. And this is going back to that abundance of information point that we were making earlier, right? In the sense that clients will see, they'll send me posts, or they'll show me things that people are posting online, or I'll see people filming stuff. And it's just these cute little, like, let's call them flows. Let's call them like, a series of save these 4 moves for your next workout or whatever.
Yeah, they're not even named exercises. Not that all exercises need to have a name, but it's just like move 1, move 2, move 3, because it's so random and obscure what they're doing.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. But it's just like, And then you see this stuff, and then you're just like, oh, okay, so is that how you try what this person is doing, or you end up buying one of their programs, or maybe you end up actually saving some of their posts and trying them in your next workout, whatever it ends up being. You end up trying them and you end up failing miserably because you don't have the prerequisites to be able to do that thing. And then the thing that most people never really realize until they've been pointed in the right direction is this person did not get to where they are posting this thing because they do what they post.
Mm-hmm.
They do the bread and butter basics on their own time. They just don't film that stuff because they know that's not what you're going to want to watch, right? That stuff doesn't really sell as much. But if I post the stuff that looks good on camera, you're going to watch it on your feed. You're going to think, oh my God, this guy knows something the other people don't, and I'm going to try that in my next workout. But then you realize you go try your next workout. Oh shit, how the hell do I cover this gap from point A to whatever the fuck he is? I can't do that. But again, that is literally one of my biggest pet peeves. And I hate it when people do that because I see how some of these people train in real life. And then I see the garbage that they post online. And then when people try their posts or when people try their exercises and they're disappointed, it's just, it breaks my heart because you think there's something wrong with you when in reality, you're just being misled by someone who's desperate for your clicks and validation. Can you tell
Well
this is
said.
a bit of a hot topic for me?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me as well, it's like, it's not real. And sure, nice for clicks, and there's validity to that and the buy-in and all, there's always a justification for anything. But going back again to the critical thinking is you have to realize that this is like, this person may have been training for 8, 10, 15, 20 years and they can do this stuff. And they didn't do that on day 1 and they didn't do that on year 3. And they just like, there's so many other things, but the watching someone's journey online of like when they were 16 and they went into a gym and like it's boring. No one sees that. It's just cool when you can do one leg jumpy things. Like that's cool and that gets attention. It's not cool to see someone doing a 5-second eccentric squat with 135 pounds on the bar for 6 years in a row. Like that's not that cool. No one's gonna watch that, right? It's just the unfortunate reality of our unlimited access to information.
Yeah, I think who was it? I think John Goodman said it, where he said, proper fitness is same shit, different shirt, right?
It was
So you're
Ben
doing
Ben
this.
Bruno, but yeah.
Oh, Ben Bruno, same.
Yeah.
But love both those guys.
Yeah.
But anyways, where it's just like you're doing the same thing day in and day out. You're probably just wearing different clothes.
Yeah, it's very true. Like the basics of training always work. There's a reason why that they exist, and there's a reason why people continue to use them because they work. And I think we all go through this, and I'm sure you did as well. It's like you start training, you do, the basics because that's all that you know and that's all you've heard about. And then you get a little like stronger and you get into this intermediate level and you're like, I'm the man. I can like do shit. I mean, you try a bunch of stuff and you're like, it didn't really do much for me. And then as you, kind of finish that arc into like your more advanced stage of training, you're like, I'm just doing the stuff that I was doing at the beginning, just with like a little bit better form, a little bit more intensity and, some other variables that I'm manipulating, but like I'm still just doing the same stuff and I'll just do that for forever.
Yeah. You ever seen that chart for like the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to describe it for the listener, it's just like, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect essentially is a bit of a graph, and I'll try to like draw with my fingers, but then I'll also try to describe it at the same time. People are just listening on audio platforms. Essentially, on the one hand, on the bottom axis, you have confidence, and on the bottom, the vertical axis, you have confidence. So as your competence just barely starts to increase in the beginning, your confidence is at a peak. You think you're the shit, you know everything, you're the most smart trainer around, or whatever it ends up being. And then the more you find out, the more your confidence actually ends up to drop. So your competency is increasing, but now your confidence is dropping, so it drops down a little bit. And then you're just like, oh shit, there's so much I don't know. This is so much more complicated than I thought. And then as your competence increases even more, your confidence slowly starts to slope back up. But then now you realize, yes, you know a lot, but then there's so much more that you don't know. But at least you don't know that you don't know it, right? But it's never back at that peak of, I am just the best around. And that's essentially what you just described, right? Where it's like you want to have enough confidence in what you're doing that, hey, I'm doing the right thing or I'm doing something that's going to benefit me. But you don't want to be so confident to the point where you're absolutely blinding yourself to any other potential answers to that same question, and thinking that your method is the method, or you've unlocked the secret, or this is a one size fits all solution and what you found works best for everybody. Yeah, because like, if you ask both of us a question on how to solve X, Y, or Z problem, I'm sure both of us could give a solution, and they might even be different solutions, but they both might work, right? It's not that you're right and I'm wrong. It's just, who are we trying to answer the question for, right? So it's, again, it depends.
It always depends. And it might even be two different solutions to, on paper, the same problem, but two different personalities, right? You have two different clients. They're both the same age, same, injuries, same physical stats, all that stuff. But one of them has one personality, one person has a different personality. And it's like, hey, I'm just going to give these people the same solution, but in a slightly different way, or maybe present it in a different way, because that's what's going to work for them. Because the most important part of personal training is the personal part, not even really the training part.
Man, that was a slap in the face when I found that out. I was so excited in the beginning, where I'm just like, all right, yeah, I'm learning about all the anatomy, learning about the physiology. Ooh, what's this thing called biomechanics? This is cool. And then you realize it doesn't really matter how much I know or how much I nerd out about the nuts and bolts of training. If I don't have the language or the communication skills or the ability to relate to different human beings, or just the ability to understand where you are and sort of being able to meet you there, my knowledge essentially means nothing. So it was just, that was a slap in the face the day I found that out. It was just like, oh, I'm focusing on the training. Shit, personal. I'm working with human beings, and each human being is different, and each human being requires a different solution and different approach. And I got to take my knowledge and mold it a different way to help this person, as opposed to just giving them the one solution that I thought was going to fix everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think every good trainer has had that that realization at some point, hopefully early on in your career. But it's not to say that it's not important to deeply understand the underlying anatomy, biology, biochemistry, physiology, all the things. You need to know those things so you know how to apply them. And now, if you're not a trainer, you definitely don't need to know those things in detail. Like there's other people who, like us, who can teach you those things and sift through it all for you. But if you are a trainer, you do need to know those things. You can't just be a cool person with a six pack. Like that's not enough. It's nice, but it's not enough.
No. And then again, the problem is using a six pack as like a measure of who I should listen to or who would be a good authority. Is, again, they may know what works for them. It doesn't necessarily mean they know what's going to work for you. And then not only that, the more you watch people train, because I've seen some really good athletes, and I've seen who they're coached by. And sometimes you start to realize that people don't achieve their results because of their training. Some people actually achieve the results in spite of their training, right? In the sense that they're just so physically gifted, or they're so driven that they're going to do the extra work on their own time. You and I, as coaches, we can't really take credit for, people's achievements, right? We can celebrate with them because we care about them. But if my client ends up, achieving some sort of a personal goal, like whether it be a new squat record, whether it be a max amount of chin-ups, whether it be an aesthetic-based goal, whatever it is, you and I didn't do that, right? We guided them, we pointed them in the right direction. Right. And this is something I realized sort of like a couple of years into my career, after I got frustrated with that exact thing we were just talking about, where I thought, the more I know, the more I study, the more courses I take, I'll be able to help people. I'll be able to solve all their problems. And then I essentially thought I was a magician, right? That's the analogy I always like to use. You come to me, you tell me what your problem is, I'll wave my magic wand, I'll make it go away, because I'm just that good. And then the more I do this, the more I work with real human beings, the more I realize, at best, I'm a GPS. You tell me where you are. You tell me where you want to go. I can tell you the safest way. I can tell you the fastest way, or I can tell you the most effective way. But ultimately, nothing happens unless you drive the fucking car, right? Yeah. And then relating it back to the in spite of training thing, right? It's just some people, it's just like they're being given a completely wrong route, but they just keep barreling through, or they reroute the thing and they end up getting where they wanted anyways, right? So, yeah.
No, good shit, man. I agree with that very much so. There are so many paths to the top of the mountain, so to speak. But you've got each person has to find their own way through it, because that's no one else can do this for you. If we could sit here and lift weights and stretch and eat right and drink water and stuff for you, I gladly would do that. And our job would be the easiest thing in the entire world, and we'd all be super rich. But that's not the way it is, and that's not the case. Not to say that our job is the hardest in the world. We're not playing who has the hardest job Olympics here, but it's you got to put the work in. That's the only way to do it.
And that brings this conversation really full circle, right? Because you started this thing off by saying, what is it that you don't have to enjoy every part of the process? You don't have to love strength training, right? And it's literally that where you don't have to enjoy this. This can literally just be the thing that allows you to get more of what it is you care about. Could you repeat the last thing you said there? Because there was a point there you made that I really want to touch on.
I would if I could remember it.
There's many paths to the top of the mountain. This doesn't have to be. Anyways, new topic.
Now, what was it? Many topics to the top of the mountain. Yeah, man, it's gone. It's gone from my brain. I don't know.
No, we were about to have a moment of beauty there. It's okay. It'll if I just randomly snap back, it will
come back. Yeah, well, listen, this has been very good. I think we've left people with a lot to think about. Do you have any other things that you wanted to talk about today, or kind of let people know about before we wrap it up?
Let's touch on one thing you and I were talking about before we actually hit recording, right? Where you sort of want to take a little bit of a longer term. You want to take a view of things that extends beyond the initial transformation, right? So one thing I think is really good for people to hear us talk about is you don't simply want to quantify your efforts on your fitness journey, your training journey, your nutritional journey, whatever it is, with just a simple before and after, right? Because this is meant to be a lifelong change. This is meant to be, on some level, an identity shift. This is meant to be you creating skills so that you can become a better version of yourself. So it's not just, this is where you are, this is where you're going to go, let's say a year from now, and, the before and after picture. The thing that I think people would really benefit to think about is no one ever thinks about after the after. It's like, you got the before and after. Cool. You got the transformation. You got the goal. You got the chin ups. You got the abs, whatever it is. You lost 20 pounds. Now your goal is to keep it off, right? Now your goal is to maintain everything you've been working so hard for. So don't just think about before and after. Think about what happens after the after. Because if you employed unsustainable methods to get to where you are, you're going to get slapped in the face with reality a little bit. And you sort of want to think about that from the get-go, in the sense that sustainable habits lead to sustainable results, versus if either you're crash dieting or you're working out at a frequency that you can't maintain, or you're just putting your body through hell because you're just thinking, oh, I just really need to get to this like goal that I set for whatever my after point is. Amazing. I'm really glad you're motivated, but just think about what happens after you achieve the goal, or after you're on the other side of that goalpost. Because you and I have seen this many times. It's just like, how many times have you gotten close to a goalpost only to realize, okay, that goalpost has shifted somewhere else now. Now you need to sort of shift gears to work towards that goal, right? So I think the thing that we can leave people with is, it's not just the before and after. Please consider what happens after the after, because we want you to be able to do this for life. It's not simply just a short-term change. You achieve it and then you're done. You don't have to keep working out anymore. You don't have to eat clean, go to sleep early, drink water, get your steps in, whatever it ends up being, right? So you want to do this in a way where it actually improves the quality of your life. So not just make it a chore and do the thing and then assume at some point you're going to be done, because it doesn't finish until you die, essentially. And we're trying to make you harder. We're trying to make it harder to die.
That's right. Fitness is it's a forever game, right? This thing lasts for forever. You get the abs, you get the whatever, these take certain amounts of time and whatever, but they don't take forever. But your body and all the things that you do in your life require your body and require you to move and require you to feel good and be healthy and all that stuff. And so by default, not because we make the rules, we certainly don't make the rules. This is just a forever game. And so, yeah, chase those things, have short-term, medium-term, longer-term goals, but like, really, this is it's just got to last for forever, because that's just the way it is. And if we could change it, maybe we would, but also maybe not.
Probably not.
Probably not. Well, good stuff, man. I appreciate you very much taking the time to chat with us today. I think, again, we've left people with a lot to think about, both technically in training and just philosophically thinking about fitness and health and stuff as well, which is what I love. It's what the whole point of this podcast, I know, is supposed to be. So I appreciate you very much. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
Well, my main form of social media is Instagram. What you can do to find me is just type in my name, ASAD, Asad. Was here. I spelled the was like a degenerate, WUZ. So, yeah, just think about that asshole who's like graffitiing things on the wall saying, Asad was here. That's how you find it.
Perfect. I'll put it in the show notes. And in and around Toronto, the gym. What area of Toronto are you particularly in? If people like are from here that want to.
Most of my training I do out of a gym called Apex Training Center. Shout out. It's located down the street from Yorkdale Mall. That's where I do most of my training because I've invested a lot into this place. It is an absolute playground, and we are just getting more and more toys, and the gym's only getting better, which means I can only have more fun with my people. Amazing. That sounded very sadistic. It's not meant to be, but maybe it is.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but no, it's cool. I mean, I've not been, but I've seen plenty of stuff like through you and through other people and whatever from that gym over the years, and looks like an awesome place. You guys got awesome equipment, and obviously, like, you care about it. One thing is, like, if a gym has Atlantis equipment, you know that someone in that gym like knows what's up, and so at least that's like pretty much a green flag of a gym. Because even if you just have a ton of money and you want to spend money on expensive stuff, you probably wouldn't even know to like, well, why would you choose the Atlantis stuff over any other brand? You would just go cheaper. But if you have Atlantis stuff, like, that's a pretty solid sign of a pretty big green flag, I'd say.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of gyms, and it's trying to get the owner to upgrade the gym. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth. Like or one of the gyms I used to train out of, just getting someone to reupholster one of the benches, or fix the treadmill because people come in to use the treadmill. It was like pulling teeth. Versus the owner here, Matt, to his credit, if you show him how upgrading the gym in X, Y, or Z way provides value to the members, he'll do it. You actually have to stop him from spending money. So I give him a lot of credit for that. And yeah, we've amassed a couple of Atlantis pieces. We have a couple of Prime pieces on the way. We've upgraded this place a lot. So it is when I say it's a playground, it is an absolute playground. Like, you can do anything you need to at this point. And it's just, I love it because now I have more options to help people with.
Yeah. That's what it's about. Amazing, man. Well, I'll have to come by the gym and we'll have to train together at some point soon. But I appreciate you very much. Threat or promise? Yeah, man. Thank you very much. I'll throw your Instagram in the show notes as well. Any last message that you want to leave the people with here?
Never half-ass two things. Whole-ass one thing.
Fuck, I love that. Awesome. All right, buddy. Thank you very much. I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. Guys, follow Asad. Asad was here on Instagram, and reach out if you're in and around the Toronto area. Follow us on Instagram, whatever. What was the other thing that I'm supposed to say? And then this thing is always so weird. I love you, each and every one of you, for listening. I appreciate you. Subscribe to the podcast, rate and review, all those good things makes it grow, and helps other people find it. All that good stuff. Go outside, be a good person. See you next time.